everybody, it's Pumpkin. Who's ready for another chapter of our book? But I know I love you. I am. Okay, so I hope you're enjoying this. We certainly are. And grab your whip and start working on it. I don't know what's going on. See you at the end. Okay, bye.
Downward turn. The best I can say about the next couple of weeks after the shower is that Camre was more or less stable. She didn't get much better, but she didn't get much worse either. Since she had to take a leave from her job because of her sickness, we developed a temporary new normal. I'd bring her to her mom's house in the morning when I went to work. She'd spend the day with her mom, taking it easy and resting. After work, I'd pick her up, we'd go home, have dinner, and she would head to bed. She didn't have much energy for anything else. What she was trying to do more than anything was keep eating so that Gavin could continue to grow. The Zofran pump was a necessary hassle. With its help, she threw up only every couple of days instead of several times a day. Some women actually changed their own pumps, but because the doctor wanted to monitor Camre for dehydration, she would go in regularly to the office. A lot of the time, she would be given IV fluids while she was there because she got dehydrated easily. Having those IVs wasn't pleasant, but it saved us emergency trips to the ER. Despite the inconvenience, Camre was willing to do everything she could to make sure our baby was safe. As things finally settled down, Camre was doing well enough that the doctor ordered a home nurse to come to our house to administer the IVs and change the Zofran pump. She wasn't really gaining much weight, but she wasn't losing much either, so her OB/GYN kept encouraging her to hang in there while Gavin was developing. Gavin was growing, not quite as much as he should have, but he was growing steadily. Each visit to the doctor, we would anxiously wait for a report and were relieved when his heart continued to be strong and he continued to kick and move. Camre always felt a little better after getting IV fluids, but one time something went wrong. Instead of the IV fluid going into the vein like it was supposed to, it ended up infiltrating her arm. Her arm swelled and became hard and painful, so we had to make an emergency trip to the ER. There isn't much that can be done when an IV slips out of place except to wait and let the excess fluid be reabsorbed. Looking back, it was just another sign that things weren't heading in the right direction. But at the time, it just seemed like one more relatively minor frustration. The day that everything fell apart started like most other days. Camre went to her mom's and I went to work. I had been feeling sort of anxious ever since the shower, but I can't say that I was feeling more anxious than usual that day. I was just sort of normal anxious. A lot of the reason I was pretty calm was because Camre was very calm. Even when she was really concerned, she didn't dwell on it. I gave her a kiss and told her I'd see her after work. I was assigned to a mobile safe light unit, so rather than working in a shop, I drove around my territory fixing windows on site. When I had free time in between clients, I'd give Camre a call. She always assured me that she was doing okay. "Don't worry, everything's going to be okay," she said, echoing my own words. That afternoon, when I picked her up, she mentioned casually that her throat felt funny. When she talked, her voice sounded a little raspy. I asked her if she thought she should go to the ER, but she declined. "I'm fine," she said. "Maybe I'm catching a cold." "Okay, but if you start feeling bad, let me know." A little later, she calmly came up to me and said, "Steve, I think something's wrong. I think maybe we should go to the ER. I seem to be having trouble catching my breath." I tried not to panic as I walked with her to the car. She was calm and collected, but I could tell her breathing was getting more strained. By the time we got to the hospital, she was having a lot of trouble talking. "Can you breathe?" I asked. "Yeah," she said, "but it's getting harder." When we explained to the desk what was happening, we were immediately assigned to a room. A nurse came in and took Camre's vital signs. She was hooked up to some oxygen, and we began the long wait everyone who has ever been to the ER understands all too well. We waited and waited and waited. Nurses came in occasionally, and the ER doctor popped his head in the door once. We had a lot of questions, but nobody was around to give us answers, so we just hunkered down to wait. Once she got some oxygen, Camre began to breathe more easily, but she really wasn't able to talk at all, so she began writing notes instead. I called her mom and explained the situation. Her mom lived only a few minutes from the hospital, so she said she would come immediately if we needed her. At the time, we said things were okay, so we just kept waiting to see what was going to happen. By the time a couple of hours had passed, I could tell that Camre was getting worried, but typically she really was more concerned about the baby than about herself. Because no one had panicked when we first checked in, we still thought that whatever was happening wasn't all that serious. At one point, a new nurse came in and took Camre's vital signs. She frowned a little, and I wondered what she was thinking. "This looks to me like preeclampsia," she said, quickly adding, "but I'm just a nurse, not a doctor, so I can't make that diagnosis." I had never heard of preeclampsia. If I had, I would have made several different decisions over the next few hours, but at the time I asked naively, "What's that?" The nurse explained that preeclampsia was a problem that can occur late in some pregnancies that increases the risk for both mother and baby. She reassured us that if it were preeclampsia, there were medications that could be given that would help, so we didn't really give it much more thought. As I've said, at the time, we trusted that the medical personnel would know what was going on, even if we didn't. In retrospect, I wish I had asked more questions about preeclampsia because, as we later learned to our shock and sorrow, preeclampsia can become eclampsia very quickly. In fact, untreated eclampsia is one of the leading causes of death of both mothers and babies throughout the world. When it isn't caught in time, it creates a lot of problems for the mom, like high blood pressure, kidney and liver issues, swelling, and shortness of breath. If it isn't treated immediately, seizures can begin. At that point, preeclampsia becomes eclampsia. When that happens, the baby has to be taken by emergency C-section to save its and the mother's life. It's one of the risks of pregnancy that no one really talks about. The nurse took more vitals and left the room. No one other than that one nurse ever mentioned preeclampsia again, so we didn't give it any more thought. However, if I had to do it over again, I would have insisted that a doctor take a look at Camre to determine if she was preeclamptic. I would have paid closer attention to all of her vital signs and demanded that someone figure out if her breathing problem was from her throat or her lungs. But hindsight is 20/20, and I did the best I could at the time. With everything that happened later on, I still have to remind myself that I did my best. If I didn't, I'd be eaten alive by guilt. After about 4 hours in the ER, someone decided that since Camre was 33 weeks pregnant, they probably should keep her overnight just to be sure that nothing more severe than the loss of her voice was going on. She got into a wheelchair and was transported to a regular medical room at about 10 p.m. We called her mom and said that she was going to stay the night, so her mom came over to sit with us for a while. Now I wonder why she wasn't taken to labor and delivery, but at the time everyone thought she had at least another month before Gavin would be born. Again, if I had to do it over, I would have insisted that she be taken to labor and delivery immediately. Being in a hospital is like being a stranger in a foreign country. You're surrounded by both odd silence and strange noises. People pass outside your door in a hurry, yet you wait and wait for someone to come into your room. You doze, but you never sleep. You're always on alert, and yet you don't know what to expect when someone does come in. You hope to see a doctor, but doctors come at random moments. As you wait, time itself begins to lose meaning. All you do is wait. About midnight, Camry's mom encouraged me to go home and get some rest. "You've got to go to work in the morning," she said. "Go home. They say Camry is fine, and I'll stay here with her." "Are you sure?" I asked. "Yes, I'm sure. If anything changes, I'll call you right away." I didn't want to leave and said I'd stay, but Camry scribbled a note. "I'm just fine. Go home." "But I'm worried about you," I argued. She shook her head and mouthed the words, "Go home. I'm fine." Camry is a very strong, very stubborn woman, and because no one was indicating that the situation was critical, I reluctantly agreed. "Be sure to call me if anything changes," I said to her mom. Camry rolled her eyes and shooed me out of the room. A couple of times on the way to the parking lot, I almost turned back, but I had to be to work early in the morning, and I knew Camry's mom would let me know if I needed to come back. However, as I think about it, leaving Camry that night is one of the greatest regrets of my life. Obviously, nothing can change the fact I wasn't with her. I can't get a mulligan or a do-over on my actions. I have to accept that I did what I thought was right at the time, but I've wondered so many times about how things might have been different if I had stayed. Deep down, I know that my presence probably might not have changed anything, but that hasn't stopped me from asking, what if? What if I'd asked more questions about preeclampsia? What if I had insisted that a doctor find out what was going on? What if I had only stayed? I realize that I can't change the past, and so I try not to dwell on it anymore. It sometimes helps that I know Camry doesn't remember that I wasn't there, and even if she did remember, she wouldn't blame me. But I remember. I didn't sleep much that night and was feeling pretty tired when I texted Camry first thing in the morning. She still couldn't talk, but she texted back that she was feeling a little better. She added that her mother had gone home and she was just lying in bed watching TV and waiting for the doctor to come in. "No worries," she wrote. She added she thought she would be released in the early afternoon, so I planned to get off work early and pick her up. I wondered for a minute why they would release her if her throat were still bothering her, but as I've said before, I really didn't question medical decisions at the time. As I began to replace the first broken windshield on my job list, I'm sure the client thought that I wasn't very friendly, but I was becoming more and more anxious. I just wanted to get the job done and get back to the hospital. Now, I almost hate to admit it, but while I was worried about Camry, I was worried about a lot of other things as well. I knew that the woman who had the vision had told me things were going to be okay, but I didn't completely believe her. I mean, who would believe someone who just came up to you out of nowhere and said that God had a message for you? On one level, I did believe, but on another level, I was still worried. I worried how we were going to get all the things a new baby would need since we had counted on Camry's income and she had to quit work early. I worried about how I was going to juggle being a new dad with the demands of my job. I worried about mortgage payments and car payments and a lot of other things. Looking back, I realized that I was worried about a whole lot of material things that ultimately weren't nearly as important as I thought they were. But I was still worried. Over the course of the morning, Camry and I texted a few more times. She said she was still feeling pretty good and that she still thought that she would go home in the afternoon. I vividly remember her last text. "Everything's good. I'm fine. The baby is fine. I love you." It was the last thing I heard from her before her brain injury.
Okay, I hope y'all enjoyed that, and there should be another episode of this coming out fairly soon. Okay. Love y'all, and if you did enjoy it, please thumbs up. Let us know. Okay, thanks. Bye, guys.